Good morning. I'm Charlie Jones. Spent 22 years in the Air Force. I had a couple years in the Naval Reserve before I went into the Air Force, and I discovered that if you bounce around on a destroyer out in the middle of the Atlantic, I get seasick. So I decided to go on a different route and went into the Air Force, mainly because the Navy said they were going to draft me. And this was back during Vietnam, and I didn't particularly want to go back into the Navy, so I went into the Air Force. I first started out as in the weather field. You have a couple of different job areas that you get into in the weather field, or at the time. One of them would be a weather observer, and that's what I started out. So I started out as a weather observer and spent 4 years in downtown Washington, D.C., playing around with climatological reports, doing statistical analysis, playing around with mean density altitudes, different things, because we were writing national security books for the whole world. So we would take a little town in Siberia or whatever, and write up the climatology for that little town in Siberia as a contingency plan, so that they know that if we got reassigned to Siberia, this is what you would expect in the way of weather. And this is what the big problem was with the airplanes, because you're playing around with mathematics, and you have an issue with how you get that plane off the ground. The density of the air has a lot to do with how much weight you can put on the plane, what's your bomb load, what's your cargo load, and all that. So they needed to know all that good stuff. But after 4 years of climatology, I went to Korea, spent a year in Korea supporting the Army up in a little town called Uijeongbu, about 10-15 miles south of the DMZ. And it was kind of quiet up there. It was different because all I had in the way of aircraft to support were small planes. I had the Huey helicopters. Have everybody seen the issues of the television series MASH? You know, the helicopter that they fly in with the wounded, with the kind of a girder thing on the back. Well, that was what we had. And we had that, and then we had the newer version of that, and then a couple of smaller single-engine aircraft that they used for observation. After a year of that, I went to Tactical Air Force headquarters at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, and that's when I got into supporting the F-4s. We had air defense aircraft there, the 102s, the 106s, and all kinds of fancy jets, and that's when I really got introduced to the C-130 aircraft, which you may or may not have heard about, but it was one of the major cargo and troop carrier planes during Vietnam, and they still fly it around. Has anybody seen the Blue Angel Navy demonstration? Have you seen the support plane that flies with them?
Oh,
I think they call it Fat Albert or something, yeah. But it's a C-130, a very, very dependable airplane, a very strong airplane. And I enjoyed working with them, or forecasting for them, because they didn't have to worry about icing up. As the plane goes up, you have the temperature drops down. Normally, the dry adiabatic lapse rate is like 2 degrees per 1,000 feet. So if you start out at 40 degrees on the ground, you go up just a little bit and you're into freezing. And if it's a little bit of moisture, that ices up on the wings. Really messes up your configuration for flying. So the C-130s, the turboprop airplanes, flew right through it, no problem. Other airplanes, you had to worry about ice building up and going back down because of additional weight and loss of the airflow. After a little bit of couple years at Langley, I went back to school, and then I had a really tough job. I spent 3 years forecasting the weather in Homestead, Florida, and I figured I was going to go to Vietnam, and I wound up in Homestead, Florida. Then after Homestead, Florida, I figured I was going to go to Vietnam, and I wound up in Okinawa. And so I spent a couple years in Okinawa, and then I thought that's 5 years in the tropics, and so I thought I'm going to go to Vietnam, and instead of that, I went to Grand Forks, North Dakota. And after a year there, I decided I had enough of weather, and I got into recruiting. That's how I wound up in New England, and well, not in air to initially. Initially, I started in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, got moved around a lot, spent 1 year in Woonsocket, then I went over to Hartford, Connecticut. I was supervising Air Force recruiting in the eastern half of Connecticut for a year. And then they were looking for somebody to open up and supervise Air Force recruiting in Europe. And I got selected and spent 3 years running all over Europe, Spain, Netherlands, mostly Germany, but England, Scotland. You know, any place where they had a military-dependent high school, we would go so we could talk to the high school students. They made me come home after 3 years and brought me, that's when I wound up here in air. My station was just outside of Hanscom Air Force Base at the recruiting squadron headquarters. And I spent a year covering all of New England, supervising officer recruiting. And I was taking the place of a captain who was still in school. And when he came back, I wound up downtown Boston for a little bit, and then they decided they were going to move the squadron headquarters, and that's when I retired. So after retirement, I picked up, because of your capabilities in the military, I'd gotten an associate's degree while I was on active duty, and picked up a lot of college courses while I was on active duty, and then I completed my college at UMass Lowell, and got an undergrad degree in management, and then I got an MBA. Well, once again, because of the GI Bill, let the military pay for a lot of that. And I had a good time and spent a lot of time there.
My name is Staff Sergeant Russell. I am actually a recruiter for the Massachusetts Army National Guard. So that's why I was like, yeah, got the recruiting going on here. But is everybody awake? Yeah.
I tried to put them to sleep for you.
Okay, hey, listen, you know, it's a give and take thing. So, you know, here I've been in for about 15 years, and just a little bit about my story. I was actually thought about the Air Force in high school, but didn't end up going through with it. Never thought the military was anything that I would want to do. Okay, and then I went to college, and I'm not really a big student, I'm not gonna lie to you, school's really not my thing, but, you know, kind of don't have a choice. But anyway, I was in college for a couple years, and then I ended up having my first child with my now wife, and during that time, I was really struggling to make ends meet. My father had just passed away, and I just had a new child. My mother was going through a lot of stuff, and you know, I was working basically a overnight shift. So I was awake when my kid was asleep, and I was asleep when my kid was awake. And I was like, I don't really want this life. Like, this is not working. Like, I felt stuck. I felt like I couldn't make any gains, right? So I ended up talking to this guy that I work with. I worked at Stop and Shop distribution facility, basically just loaded pallets, put them in trucks, and the trucks went out to Stop and Shop stores, and then they would be distributed. So I met a guy there, and his name was Gabe, and he ended up becoming like one of my best friends that I've known for like 15 years. But he said, oh, well, you want to change in your life, maybe you should, you know, look at the military. And I went in, took the office, and sat down and did it, and had to leave my wife and 2 children, because I had a second child. I would leave my wife and 2 children for 6 months to go to my basic training and job training. And then came back and it was still a struggle. It was still a struggle, but you know, I had something going for me. Then I got a job in recruiting and I've been doing it for 8 years. And now, you know, my kids are flourishing. I'm able to provide for them. I bought a house for myself and my family, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I can definitely say that the military itself was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, because it changed it and gave me more opportunity, you know? So that's just like a little thing that, like my guard story is what we call it. But serving is definitely something that, you know, is something that you gotta reflect back and look at, because the military gives you an opportunity to make a difference, not only in yourself, but in your community, in your state, in your country, all that kind of stuff. I personally have never been overseas. I've never deployed, I've never been in combat. But one of the things I was able to do is when I joined as a water purification specialist. Basically, I used a reverse osmosis to purify well water or purify any kind of water and make it safe to drink. So, one of the things I did, does anyone remember a huge earthquake that Haiti had? Anybody? Yeah, you do? Okay. So one of the things that I did as a water purification specialist is I actually went to Haiti for one of my 2 weeks trainings that we do in a year. And I actually purified their well water in like the very deserted part of Haiti where it was very, very poor and all they had was sticks and tarp. And, you know, because that island was just devastated from that earthquake. So I went over there and I worked with a team and other National Guards. We built schools, we built houses, we built like shelters and all that stuff. And I had actually purified well water that they had to make it safe to drink. Because if you guys think that the homeless people in America have it bad, try a homeless person in Haiti where all they have is sticks and tarp and it's 100 degrees. It really puts things in perspective. And one of the last things that I did when we were overseas, or when we were over there, is we had we had a 10,000 gallon water tank. We had to empty it. Instead of just letting it go on the ground, we actually hooked it up to a pump and shot it over the wire that was around us. And you would, it's ridiculous what you could see, because it was like opening day at a water park. There was people coming, they were having fun, they were sliding in the mud, all that kind of stuff, because they don't have access to water like that like we do. You know what I mean? So it really puts it in perspective, and I'll never forget it, is I had like one of those little Johnson & Johnson shampoo bottles, and I saw a mother who had a baby, like a newborn baby, had to be like 9 months, maybe a year. I ran over and I gave her the shampoo, and I was like, here, take this, use it, because again, they can't go down to CVS and grab that, you know what I mean? So I gave it to them, and her look to me was how thankful she was, will forever be implemented in my mind. And when I look back and I say, was it worth it to join the military? That moment right there is what I'll always remember. So if you guys have any aspirations or anything to want to make a change and be something bigger than yourself or make a change in the world, look back and say, hey, I did something. The military is a great option, because I can confidently say, looking back, that I made a difference in that mother's life. And although it was very, very little, it was something where I said, I'm so glad that I did, because I never would have had that opportunity without the military itself. So that's just kind of like one of the things that I've done, but I've done all kinds of stuff. Like I've shoveled out the red line personally when we've had like big snowstorms so that people can get to their, you know, appointments, to daycare, to school, all that kind of stuff. It was terrible. It wasn't fun at all. Imagine hand shoveling the train tracks of the red line. But you know what? That's what we do in the National Guard. When the first responders need assistance, they call us in, and that's what we do. So that's kind of like my story and my highlight. If you guys ever sit down with me about thinking about joining the military, I'm gonna tell you that same story, because I think it's a great one, and it really examples the opportunities that you have in the military.
retired U.S. Army. This is Joe Landry. He's 100 years old. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and he started off landing in Normandy on the 28th of June 1944, and he drove a deuce-and-a-half truck with quad 50 millimeter weapon used to shoot down airplanes on the back of his truck, and he supplied most of Patton's ammunition and other items for war. Joe just turned 100 on the 14th of October. I'm 78 years old. I served in the U.S. Army. Started out at Fort Eustis and Newport News. Went on to Fort Lee, Virginia, then to Natick Laboratories. At Natick Laboratories, I was a medical lab technician, and we trained personnel to acclimatize themselves at 14,310 feet, which is the height of Pikes Peak. The reason behind that is at that time we were afraid that we may be fighting in the Himalayas against the Chinese army. I went on from going to Pikes Peak. I went to Vietnam. My job was to recover bodies of soldiers and airmen who had been shot down over Laos and Cambodia. I did a short tour there and came back to the States and switched over to medical lab again, and I ended up finishing after serving 20 and a half years on Fort Devens. I opened up a mobilization blood donor center during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. The reason behind that, the Red Cross was going to charge the military $110 for a unit of blood. Does anybody know how many units can be differentiated from 1 pint of blood? We differentiate 7 different units. You have red cells, you have white cells, you have platelets, you have cryoprecipitate and other breakdowns. And so instead of paying the Red Cross for all the blood, the military decided to collect its own. And my final duty was to open up a mobilization-only blood donor center at Fort Devens. I have 3 children. All 3 of them graduated from their high school. My daughter graduated in 2010. In 2009, she set the home run record for softball. She said, home runs, RBIs, and runs scored. And it was just broken this year by somebody from your high school. So I'm very proud of my daughter. My oldest son played baseball, basketball, and softball, or baseball, basketball, and cross country.
Hi, as Brett said, my name is Joe Landry. I live in Shirley. Born in 1924, just a youngster. I was drafted into the Army right here at Fort Devens, sent to North Carolina for training, came back to Devens for a while, was shipped down to Camp Edwards, which is down the Cape. Then they shipped us back to Boston Harbor, got on a boat and went over to Scotland. From Scotland, they put us on a train and shipped us down to southern England. We were stationed around a big seaport. My outfit shot down airplanes. We had 2 different guns, like Bert said, 40 millimeter, which had a shell about that big. And we had trailers that had 450 caliber machine guns on the trailer, and you sat in the middle with a joystick, and it would go up and down and around. And then we were scheduled to go in on D-Day, June 6th, but by not being able to move all our equipment, we didn't have enough trucks. They took us off and put another outfit on, and I didn't get there till sometime in July. And they assigned us to follow General Patton, who was, we need a guy like him today, but he was a real pusher. He didn't believe in taking territory and giving it back to him. Once he captured something, we kept it. And I went in and out of several cities and towns. Like Brett said, I carried everything on my truck, from gasoline to toilet paper or bodies. And one of my trips, I don't know if you know about the 82nd Airborne, but they were stationed in a small town outside of Reims, France. And when the Battle of the Bulge started, I was assigned to go up and pick up a load of soldiers and bring them into the Battle of the Bulge. Does anybody know what the Battle of the Bulge was about? Well, anyway, it was just in the 16th of December. Hitler had gathered all his troops in the Herdgen Forest. He wanted to push us Americans and the British back to Omaha Beach so he could get a waiver and stop the war. But it was in the middle of winter, 16th of December, colder than blazes, and when we brought the troops up there, all the troops thought we were coming home by Christmas. So even the government didn't send winter clothing. So all the guys had on was regular clothes, and tremendous amount of them got frostbite on their feet. And some lost their feet because they were so bad. And some of the troops, they had what they call sandbags. They would empty the sand and wrap the burlap around their feet to keep them warm. And we ended up pushing the Germans back where they belonged. And from there we just went all down through Germany and everything. And I was stationed outside of a place called Metz, France. There was all kinds of castles and forts there. And I had to go to another city with my truck to pick up a load of supplies. And I was driving down the street, and all military vehicles had your outfit number on the bumpers. So I caught up to this Jeep, and it had my older brother's numbers on it, which he was in the Air Force. And I blew the horn to get him to stop, and the Jeep stopped. I just wanted to find out where they were stationed. And guess who jumped out of the Jeep? My brother. He was 6 years older than me. He was in the Air Corps working on Piper Cub type airplanes. But when they sent him to school, they sent him to school to learn how to fix engines on a big four-engine B-17 bomber. But he ended up working on the smallest planes they had. And we spent about 3 weekends together off and on. And one of the times was Thanksgiving 44. He being in the Air Force, they sent an airplane back to England and got ice cream and turkey and all the good fixings. So I had Thanksgiving dinner with him in 1944 in Verdun, France. My outfit was eating what they call K rations. There was breakfast, dinner, and supper. And it came in a box about the size of a Cracker Jack box. So it was quite a treat getting turkey. Food was a problem getting to the troops warm. And we went on from there. One of my trips, I had to go to a hospital where all the nurses were combat nurses were right up front with the troops, and he knows. And I had to take a load of them back for a rest. So on the way back, I stopped at a convent to see if I could convince the nuns to sleep in beds instead of on the ground. So they didn't want to let them in, but once they found out they were nurses, they let them in and treated them and gave them their own beds and everything. And it was quite an experience. And I don't know how many of you feel like going in the service, but if you want to do something with yourself and you can't afford it, join the ROTC. They pay all the bills. My son went through ROTC, and they sent him through Worcester Polytech, and then they sent him to Stanford to get his PhD in chemical engineering, all on us taxpayers. And he ended up staying in the service for 21 years. His whole 21-year career was destroying chemical weapons. The United States had a tremendous stockpile of bad weapons, and he was in charge of 3 different factories where they took the weapons into the factory, all automation, and they burnt the stuff. And he told me that I could stand on the roof and smell the fumes and it wouldn't hurt me. But I told him, you could do it, I'll take your word for it. But anyway, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my family. There were 7 in my family. Some of them came to high school here. There was two in the Air Corps, both mechanics. I was in the Army. My sister was in the Coast Guard in New York. My other brother was in the Navy in Okinawa. And my other brother ended up in Korea and Vietnam. He put 21 years in also. And my older sister, in the town of Shirley, they had a USO building. I don't know if you know what a USO is, but they had parties and everything for GIs that were stationed at Devons. And they had parties and all kinds of, helped them with everything. And she spent all her time there. And my mother, God bless her, her hair turned white while we were gone, but we survived. And I'd like to answer any questions if you have any.
When I was in Okinawa, I became a certified scuba diver and spent a large amount of time down underneath the water in the Pacific Ocean and the China Sea, and it's remarkable because you can see forever and the water's warm as compared to what you got out here. So I have to admit, when I came back and was reassigned to Grand Forks, North Dakota, they tried to talk me into scuba diving there. I said, you people are crazy. You drill a hole in the ice and go get them. But so you've got all kinds of different things that you can do. It's a life, you know, and so you can enjoy it.
You can do as much with it as you want, or as little as you want. If you have something specifically to use it for, then yes. If you don't, if you want to just do the minimum, you can. You know, if you want to make it a career, you can. It's just options. And it's only going to make you self-discover more. It's going to tell you what you're good at, what you're not good at. You know, it's just such a thing to do, to open up options for everybody, because literally that's everything that your teachers, your guidance counselors, your parents, that they want you to do. They want you to look at all the options, research them, put yourself in a position where you're properly informed, and then make the best decision for yourself. And you'll feel confident about that decision when you've looked at all the other options. If you just pick one thing and say, oh, I want to do that, okay, you can, but what happens if it doesn't work out? Did you have a backup plan? Do you know what you would do if like something went wrong? All we try to do is try to teach you that from experience, that give yourself an option, do the research, make sure you look at everything, and then make an informed decision for yourself.
What would be your proudest moment in your career, in your military career? What are you most proud of that you guys did?
My proudest moment was recovering a pilot and co-pilot that were killed in Laos, and being able to bring their bodies back. As in 1950, I was only 4 years old. My grandmother had made American Legion uniform for me so I could march in the Memorial Day Parade in 1950. And with my father. 20 weeks after that Memorial Day Parade, my father was killed in Korea, and his body was repatriated 2 years later. And that meant the most to my family, to have his body repatriated to home and buried in the States. The second most important thing was to open up a mobilization blood donor center at Fort Devens. We collected over 900 units of blood to be sent to either Saudi Arabia or to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Fort Knox, Kentucky is the home of the Army Blood Banking School, and at at that time, they were stockpiling O-negative blood and by freezing it. And right now, they have over 10 million units stockpiled in case of emergency in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And that was my most important thing that I did in the military.
I think my proudest moment was when I came home. We had a parade in Shirley, and Shirley at the time had 2,400 people, not homeless people, and 334 of us, men and women, went in the service. And when the war was over, just about everybody came home at the same time, not like now they drag, So they had a big parade. And when I saw all the men that came home, it just did something to me. And especially my best friend, before I went into service, he and I did everything together, hunting and fishing and dating girls and you name it. And he was in the Air Force in England, and I was in France. And he sent me a letter saying how he wished he could come to France to help win the war, because being a supply sergeant in the Air Force, he really didn't think he was doing anything. But I wrote back and told him, I said, they know where you are, they have your serial number. About 3 weeks later, I got a letter from my mother. They took him out of the Air Force, put him in the infantry. He was in what they call combat 3 days before the end of the war. And he got shot in the head and killed. And it just took the pins out from under me knowing that had happened. And the strange part, my brother had a best friend like I did, and he wanted to go in the Marine Corps. And his mother talked him out of it because it was too dangerous. So he joined the Coast Guard. He was on an ammo ship off the coast of Japan, got blown up and got killed. That killed my brother, But just being in the service was a real proud moment as far as I was concerned. You meet people you never forget. You think you got some good friends here, but if you're side by side in the nitty-gritty, you'll make friends that you'll never forget.
I'm not sure if you know much about this, but do you know how a medical route in the military works?
Absolutely.
What kind of what do you have to do something? Because you have to go to college and get kind of a medical degree and then enlist.
Not necessarily. See, you have certain medical careers, if you will, that require a college degree, but you have all kinds of medical careers that do not require a college degree. What you have is the technical schools, and they will teach you how to be a phlebotomist, how to be a med tech,
Radiology tech, a combat medic.
dental schools, because all the military, when you're out overseas, you don't necessarily have all the facilities you have here in the United States available. So the military has their own. So when you go to Okinawa, there's a big Army hospital someplace that was up and around Kadena. And so if something would happen, you go to the Army hospital up there, and they have the medical technicians, the X-ray technicians, the nurses' assistants, whatever. They are there, and you get the training.
What other kind of jobs can you do part-time other than National Guard stuff? Or is it only National Guard?
Part-time with the National Guard, virtually anything.
Every service has its own part-time component.
Yeah.
Yep, the Air Force has a guard and.
Radar technicians, aircraft maintenance, weather people, health, fields. I don't know if the military cooks anymore.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
So you've got the whole gamut of what you see in civilian life, you'll have in the military. Even teaching, we have people who are trainers who will train you into different jobs and keep your job certified for whatever your career happens to be.
There's actually a regional training institute where you can learn to be an instructor down in Cape Cod. It's the oldest regional training institute in the country.
Personally, I'm glad to see that the people are starting to treat Vietnam veterans well, because when they came home from the war, it was an absolute disgrace. People were spitting at them and fighting with them and calling them kid killers and stuff like that. And that has kind of gone away, thank God. And I've told many of them, I hope someday that they get treated like I've been treated,
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Remember how many years I said I was in? And remember how I said that I wasn't deployed anywhere? Who's afraid, or whose parents go, you ain't joining the military because we don't want you to go to war? Not to say that it won't happen, but I can tell you that there is situations where it doesn't. So I know that's a big concern for a lot of people. So one thing I want to throw at you, and this is a stat, is that if you were to take the number of people that, let's just say, I think it was 2023, if you take the number of people that was killed overseas, right, in a year, and you compare that to how many people died in a car accident, is the number of people dying in a car accident is greater than the people that died overseas. So what I mean by that is that every day that you get in a car, you're taking the same risk, or you're taking more of a risk than you would if you went overseas. And that's just by statistical numbers.
When I was in Korea, I was up in a little town called Uijeongbu, and if you've seen MASH, MASH was supposed to be been filmed at Uijeongbu, and the actual terrain is similar, but they actually, that's the closest I've come to combat, because they actually captured some North Korean patrol while I was there. So, people were nuts. They decided they had captured during World War II one of the Japanese mini submarines, and for some unknown reason, they decided they were going to try to drive that submarine underwater down the Han River into Seoul to create havoc down there. What they forgot was that it has full of sandbars, and they grounded it and couldn't get it off the ground close to where we were, and they had 10 guys in there, and the 10 guys running around in their quilted uniforms and AK-47s got captured about 5 miles away from where I was, and that's the closest I've come to being having face to face with it. Other than I visited Peace Village up there, Panmunjom, and that was weird because you have to take off your name tag and you can't have any weapons, and you're walking through this Peace Village, and they had these towers that are about 30 or 40 foot tall, and you look at the top of the tower and there's a North Korean following you around with a machine gun just watching you, And then when I was in Berlin, they still had the wall, and it was still separated from East Berlin and West Berlin. And to get up on the wall, once again, I had to take off my name tag. Why? With a name like Jones, I have no idea. There's got to be Joneses all over the place, but I had to take off my name tag. I could go up to the top of the wall and look, and at the bottom of the wall, it's all plowed, and you got roughly 100 yards plowed, nothing but landmines scattered around in there. And then you got another wall on the other side, barbed wire and everything up there. So the poor people from East Berlin could not get over to West Berlin. It's kind of different, and you could look at the difference in the buildings. The buildings on the eastern side still looked like they hadn't totally recuperated from World War II. The irony with that whole thing is there was a subway system in Berlin that actually went from West Berlin to East Berlin. And so you could, if you accidentally got off, you were in trouble because you may not be able to get back on. So you had to stay on the train as it went circled through.
Being in the Air Force, did you have like an aircraft that you liked flying in the most?
Did I have an aircraft that I liked flying in? Probably, well, it's a C-141. I spent most of my time flying because I was going from one base to another base or wherever. I flew from New Jersey over to England, you know, and then all around Europe in a C-141. But they've retired that and they've replaced it with, I think it's C-117 now, and that's used for cargo passengers. They take some of his guys and push them out with parachutes on. I don't know why you leave a plane that's capable of flying, but they do that. But I also had an interesting experience with the Hueys, the helicopters that they had in Vietnam. One of the last rides I had on that was in Europe. I was traveling all over, and I had flown into Belgium, down to Brussels, and I was just outside of Brussels, and I was waiting for a C-130 courier. The courier flew from Germany over to England through Brussels and back into Germany, and the darn thing broke in England. And this was like Friday night, and I'm down in Mons, Belgium, which is about 25 or 30 miles south of Brussels, and it's nothing except fields of corn and whatever. So, and I figured, I don't want to be stuck here for the weekend with no car, no nothing. And they said, there's a Huey coming in, medevac, bringing blood in from Germany. Maybe you can ride back with that. And they asked the pilot, and he said, sure, we'll take it back. So there were two of us that jumped on board this Huey, and it was configured as a medevac, so it didn't have seats in the back. It had two stretchers, and so we wound up sitting on one, putting on a seat belt, bouncing our head off of one that was above us, and takes off flying. He took that darn thing up to 10,000 feet, and this is, you know, a little Huey, a little helicopter. I felt like we were a dot in the sky up there, but you know, I was happy to get back down.
How do you feel knowing that there's a portion of Americans in our younger generation that don't believe in the Holocaust?
I believe that the Holocaust should be told in the right context, that it did happen. There's movies of American soldiers along with General Eisenhower going through the different camps. I believe in it. Everybody should know what happened in those camps because it's such a tragedy. 6 million people died in those camps, and there was no reason to kill these people other than they're being discriminated against.
I'm glad you brought it up. I wasn't going to talk about it, but on one of my trips, I was sent to a concentration camp called Dachau. It's in the history books. And I had to take a load of what I call human skeletons. They just bones and skin, that's all. We transported them from Dachau to a field hospital because they couldn't let them eat by themselves because they'd eaten themselves to death. So they had to gradually give them some. And people say it never happened, but if I put my mind to it, I can still smell the stench out of that place. And it's just unbelievable. When I was driving out of the place with a load of these skeletons, I had a guy sitting next to me with a .45 Thompson machine gun on his lap. And he wanted to kill Germans so bad. And I said, Christ, the war is just about over. You do that, you and I will go to jail. And, but it was just unbelievable. People say it never happened, but it happened.
One of the things Ben brought up, I think is important, in that if you are not sure where you're going in life, don't really have good plans, what the military offers, first of all, is a job, so you get money. Second of all, you'll be able to get promoted through the military, so you've got that opportunity. You've got training, you'll be trained. Different branches do it different ways, like he was a water purification guy and wound up in recruiting. I had no idea what weather was, and I wound up as a weather forecaster, and then got into recruiting myself. And so you've got training opportunities, you got educational opportunities, because every base I've been at has an education office, and you're typically offered college courses that you could take while you're there. And I'm not too sure what they have in the way of GI Bill anymore. I'm old. I retired before he was, I retired in 1980, so I wasn't born. So I'm not too sure what they have in the way of an educational program for after you've been in the military, but we had tuition assistance program through the Veterans Administration, and it worked out great for me. And travel. He went to Haiti. I've been all over the world. When I was in Europe, I was responsible for recruiting throughout Europe. So I'd spend, on a quarterly basis, I'd spend a week in Spain, a week in England, and then travel all over mainland Europe, up and through Germany, France, up into Belgium, Holland, the Netherlands, Greece. So it was, to me, it was a terrific opportunity. And then they have, the USO offers tours at the time, and I went up to Sweden, Norway, down into, you've heard of the Riviera, been down to Nice. Had a great time traveling. So there's all kinds of opportunities for you.
I feel when you volunteer for the military and you do your job, no matter what it is, it's extremely important. Right now, over in Ukraine, there's a war growing. It reminds me of the Revolutionary War, in that these people are fighting for their home way of life and for freedom. And the most important thing that we have here is the freedom to go to school. Women can go to school and not be spit upon or made fun of because they're women. If you go to Iraq or Iran, women's lives are not very well treated. And it's important to take care of all the people in this country. It doesn't make any difference who you are or what you are. But to serve your country is extremely important. Without people serving their country, we wouldn't have the freedoms that we have. And the most important freedom right now is on tomorrow, and that's a chance to vote. I believe everybody should have the right to vote, and you shouldn't shuck the chance to vote. You should be out there and voting for who you believe in, because it's the only way to keep our country free.
Tell you a couple of good stories. In France during the war, there were times when you weren't really doing anything. This GI friend of mine was rummaging through a blown out house, and he found a Santa Claus uniform. So he took it, and come Christmas time, he collected candy from all his friends. And he went up, put the uniform on, and he went into this town and gave it to all the kids. And he started doing that day before Christmas. And for 10 years, he went back on his own and did the very same thing, giving out candy to kids, because there was no such thing as, during the war, candy for kids. It was just impossible. And, things like that, you know, everybody talks about the war, but there was a lot of good times in the war also. It was, you know, meeting my brother was one of them, you know. And I don't know, I guess that's about it.